What is going on, everyone? This is the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast, episode 21. My name's Meek. I got my co-host across the desk, Wu.
What up?
Wu. Sun's finally poking out.
Thank God.
For those of you who live in the state of Rhode Island, you know that we've been through the ringer the past couple of days. Just rain for like 3 straight days, and finally we're seeing the end of it.
Yeah, thank God. I thought rain was supposed to come in April. Somehow we dodged all that, and now it's end of May, and we're still getting rain. So I'm so over it.
Yep. So again, welcome. Always here, excited to talk fantasy football, dynasty football. Today we're continuing our way too early rankings. We're gonna go over our wide receivers today, and got some. I looked at your rankings, Woo, and compared them with mine. A little bit spicier. I think you and I have been kind of on the same page. For running backs and quarterbacks, I think wide receiver we see a little bit of variance. So
yeah, I like it.
I'm interested. I'm excited to talk about it. We have hit 1,100 plus plays across Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you're following us on our socials at Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at Fourth and Fantasy. We're on YouTube as well. Watching a video, you can watch it as a video format like you are seeing today. And quick question, last week we had a trade talk. I think it went really well, so we got another one. But this one is from one of your buddies, Will. So why don't you take it away? Yeah.
First out, shout out to Jerry and Ty. They got a little I think this is a keeper league. I'm not entirely sure, but they've been talking about this trade for a while. I know Jerry. He's on the fence about Marvin Harrison, and he ended up shipping him out. He sends away Marvin Harrison, a 2026 third and 226 seconds, and in return he gets back Ted McMillan, Khalil Shakir, a 26 first and a 26 fourth.
Nice.
So what I do know about these teams is that Jeremy, who's getting Tet and Shakir in that first, he is a team that can compete. I think he lost in the championship last year, if not in the Final Four.
Okay.
So I know he's a competing team, and he's been telling me that he's on the fence about Marvin Harrison. He doesn't think his ceiling is as high as McMillan. So I guess we can start there.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, the key pieces of this, right, is Marvin Harrison for Tet McMillan. I think a lot of people are overreacting on Marvin Harrison's season. I know we talked about it before on the podcast, but he didn't have a bad rookie season. I think he had a average rookie season from an average NFL wide receiver, and I know we just kind of talk about him being this generational talent and all these expectations. So I think a lot of people were bummed by what they got out of him, and they think that he can't reach that ceiling, which I completely disagree with. I think, him having a full NFL offseason and being, I'm sure he probably has heard the buzz about, I'm blanking, the relationship between him and Kyler Murray and not having that connection in games. I think, he's definitely going to work on it. I already saw a video of him at the press conference. I don't know if you've seen this, but like he looks swole.
Really?
Like he's put weight on already, and like he looks big. So I'm in on Marvin Harrison, but I do like Tet. I know we talked about it last week. I traded for Tet in a dynasty league, and if I had an opportunity to trade Tet, and obviously it'd probably take some other things to get Marvin Harrison, I would do that trade 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, Ty, I think you won this trade, to be honest. I think the problem with Marvin Harrison is he's a product of being severely overdrafted last year.
Yes.
Like I think that's the biggest issue, because you're right. He had an average rookie season. Obviously, we expected more out of him, but he was so highly drafted that it hurts even more what he did this year.
Right.
So I get I don't know if it's necessarily panic, but we'll call it panic. But again, he's only had 1 year, and we've talked about young receivers and young NFL players in general and kind of their window to break out. And if once they cross that threshold, the percentage chance of them breaking out gets really low. And Harrison still has 2 years, within his range for the wide receiver position. So I'm still all in on Marvin Harrison. To be honest, I think giving up the seconds kind of makes it a little bit worse too. Like I think you could have got this deal done without those 2 seconds. But I mean, McMillan. The other thing is, like, we've seen Marvin Harrison play. We haven't seen
we know nothing
play.
about McMillan.
So
know what I mean?
It's a shot in the dark. But you get a first round pick back. I do believe that first round pick, the team that owns it, is another very good team. So it might not be a high pick.
Yeah,
so that's another issue.
I think that changes things too. Like I think if we, I'm with you. Like I'm on the Marvin Harrison side of this trade, and I think the 2 seconds on top of it is just kind of like the cherry on top. With it, like if you take these 2 seconds out, and that first round pick and the 4th and the 3rd was Shakir, like I think that's a overall fair trade. But I think just getting those 2 seconds is even better.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad deal. Like nobody got screwed on either side.
No. But if there's one way to lean, I would definitely lean the Harrison side of this trade. Especially like if you were to tell me that this 2026 first that Jeremy got was like between the 103 to the 107, I may even lean that side because you get a higher, I guess, caliber of a player in a rookie draft. Like if you're taking, from the 111, 112, like I think back to our rookie draft, I think the 111, 112 was like Caleb Johnson.
Yeah.
And Jackson Dart.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Those are great players, but like unknown, commodities as opposed to, players that you're getting in between the 103 and 107.
Right, and especially next year, it's a massive QB draft, so those picks are going to be very, very valuable.
Huge. But great trade overall. Appreciate you guys sharing that with us. That's awesome. Again, if you'd like to see, or you get some trade advice or, see your trades evaluated by us on the show, make sure you send it our way and you'll see it on the show. Moving on to some NFL news. Not a lot of news to talk about, but I just want to take a second.
Shout out Philly.
The tush push lives, baby. It lives. So the NFL owners had a meeting in Minnesota. We talked about this last episode on Wednesday. They discussed, I think they passed also about the flag football thing we talked about last episode. So that passed. Officially, NFL players are eligible to be in the Olympics for the flag football division. But this was a bigger one because I remember the night before, it was like Tuesday night, everyone was saying that that it was already basically like set in stone. It wasn't going to pass. Like it was over. Some people had already saw like leaked NFL bylaws, saying the banning of the tush push. So like it was like almost a foregone conclusion. And then Wednesday morning rolls around, and then you get word that like Jason Kelsey is in Minnesota, and he's going to the owners meeting to explain how to teach the tush push and everything like that. And they ended up taking it to a vote. So the league needed 24 votes against the tush push in order to ban it. They only got 22, and 10 were against banning the tush push. I should have gotten the list of team names.
Oh, I have them up.
Oh, you do?
Because I'm going to take a victory lap. Shout out to the Jets for not being scared. Shout out.
Hold on. Read off those names because there's one key thing with all those teams.
Yeah, most of them don't play.
Do not play Philly.
But the Jets do play Philly. So actually, is this the preseason? No, this is the preseason. I lied. So I think the only team that does play them is
the
Detroit.
Lions.
Yeah. So Baltimore, New England, Detroit, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Miami, New Orleans, Tennessee, and New York Jets all voted against it.
Right.
Or sorry, they voted not to ban it.
Correct. So again, 8 out of those 10 teams do not play Philly. One of them does, Detroit. So I give full respect to Dan Campbell.
Yeah, and that's not shocking in any way.
No, not at all. Like Dan Campbell, like that just adds to the legacy of Dan Campbell. Like, I want your best. I don't care what it is, and we're gonna stop you.
Which is how it should be. I can't believe it was even this close to ban a play.
Oh my God, it was like, and
all I needed was 2 more.
At least it get 1 year. Like, so I obviously been saying I've taken Jalen Hurts in one league. Now I finally get to enjoy him. I think Jalen Hurts is, his value is like, I think he's solidified in redraft as a top 4 dynasty or just a top 4 quarterback this year based on having the tush push. I was a little nervous that if it was banned, you would definitely have saw a bump in Saquon, but I think now the value kind of still stays the same.
And I'll give a pass to 3 teams, and it's the Commanders, Cowboys, and Giants because you're in that division. Even though I still disagree with it, you have to vote against that. So
you do.
I'll give them a pass. The other teams, sad. Los Angeles Chargers.
Hey, We gotta get every advantage. We're playing them this year, so we need every advantage we can.
Jim Harbaugh, bring your best.
I know. We'll see. Next piece of news. This one's a little bit sad. Legendary owner of the Indianapolis Colts, Jim Irsay, passes away at the age of 65. I remember Irsay being the kind of guy, like, he was all over social media. Like, he was one of those hands-on owners where he was a part of the team, and honestly, that's the kind of owner you want to see. Like, he was that healthy medium, like, between Dean Spanos, who's the owner of the Chargers, who's very hands off, versus like Jerry Jones, who's absolutely hands on. He was that
like Woody Johnson.
Yeah. He's that healthy. He was that healthy medium. So I don't know how it works when like an owner of a team passes away. Does it just like pass down to like his family, or
I would think so, because I did see something that I thought was really cool. I think he has 3 daughters. And literally their whole life, like, he's been like prepping them on like how to take over a team.
No way.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that they're gonna.
I respect that.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. And to be honest, I didn't know much about Jim Irsay. Obviously, you see all the crazy kind of side to his life, but then there was also a side that nobody really talked about. And like, I just found out about this a couple days ago. I was listening to some people were talking about him, but like the amount of stuff he did off the field that had nothing to do with football. Like, the guy was a billionaire. He was made of money. And he was just, out helping people. And like he would have, I heard one story, I forget the relation, but somehow he got in contact with somebody, and they had a family member that passed away, and he was like, listen, I'll pay for all the funeral, everything, like all the expenses.
Wow.
And they were like, nah, we don't want that. We don't want that. So then Irsay's assistant reached out again, is like, he wants to pay for it. Like, please let him do it. And they're like, okay. And then the assistant was like, he has one stipulation. You cannot ever say that he paid for it. Yeah, he didn't want any of the credit, which a tip of the cap, man. Obviously, you saw the crazy stuff that the side of his life that was, a little off the rails, but there was another side to him that nobody even knew about.
Absolutely. Class act guy, I'm sure the Indianapolis Colts are probably going to dedicate their season to him and 100%. Try to play their heart out, but unfortunate all the way around. So we're going to move on into the main topic of the show. We're talking our way too early wide receiver rankings. So just like we've done the past 2, I've had my own personal set of rankings. Wu has made his, and then together we averaged it out and kind of made our consensus rankings. Yeah. Again, these are very fluid. These are, they may not be the same that you see in about, a month or two, when we come out with our official rankings. But it's a fun exercise to kind of talk about, see them stacked up against other players and how our thoughts and feelings are.
Yeah.
So we're going to kick it off with Mr. Jamar Chase. This one was pretty much a no-brainer.
Easy.
Jamar Chase was leaps and bounds the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy last year, and he gets his extension, and now he's with Burrow, and Chase is still there. And there's a lot of statistics about when T. Higgins is on the field with Chase, Chase is dominant, and the games that Higgins miss, he kind of comes back down to earth a little bit. So I think it's a no-brainer right now, assuming health for everyone, that Chase is going to be the number 1 guy. Last year was the true breakout of Jamar Chase. 127 receptions on 175 targets, 1,708 yards, and 17 touchdowns. He was I believe he was the Triple Crown winner in wide receivers for receptions, yards, and touchdowns.
I think you're right. So
obviously I'm not expecting him to do it again, but I think even if he comes down a little bit, I'm still expecting around 1,400 to 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns, because that's just kind of the kind of guy Jamar Chase is.
Yeah, he is alpha. I'm the best guy in the league, no question about it. Even in the games that T. Higgins missed last year, so Higgins missed full games weeks 8 through 10. Mm-hmm. In those weeks, Jamar Chase was the wide receiver 19. He had a wide receiver 39 week, not good. But then in week 10, he's a wide receiver 1. He put up almost 49.9 points. So he put up 50 points. The big thing I was looking at with Chase is last year he had a 28% target share, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's gone up pretty much every year. In 2022, he only played 12 games. He had 29% target share. I'm not going to count that number just because other games won't affect that percentage. But the target share number goes up every year. It's crazy that he could be a damn near 30% target share. I mean, he is the offense, and it's rightfully so.
Yes, absolutely. And assuming he plays 17 games like he did last year, I don't see him not finishing as the number one wide receiver. I was just taking a look at their schedule. I think it's gonna be, I don't know if this is good or bad for Jamar Chase and the Bengals, but they do cross over with the NFC North, so that's the Vikings, Packers, Lions, and Bears. So those are going to be some tough games to play against, and then they also cross over with the AFC East. So that's the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Jets. So those are some interesting games. And then obviously playing in their division is a slugfest, all year long. So hopefully, they can do it again offensively. I think Cincinnati probably, took a lot of, attention to their defense, and hopefully to make sure that they don't have to, score 35 points a game.
Right.
Sorry. Do I have it? Yeah. They scored 27.8 points a game, but they also gave up 25.5 points a game. So, they're definitely trying to probably work on that. But, if they can continue to score 27.8 points per game, then that's all great things for the offense.
Yeah, they pretty much had to score 30 to have a chance last year. There is a really tough stretch of games here, defensive matchup-wise. They go Minnesota, Denver, and Detroit weeks 3 through 5. It'll be interesting tests, really early on in the season.
And then the Packers the week after that, too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, they got Steelers, and there's plenty of good defenses. And the AFC North, they got to play all those guys twice, and those games are always rock fights.
Oh, always. So we'll see. Moving on to number 2. Our number 2 consensus wide receiver is CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver from Dallas. CeeDee, I think we talked about this when we had our year in review back in January. CeeDee had an amazing year for the situation he was put in, and I think it proved that no matter who the quarterback is, he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver. He finished last year as the wide receiver 8, 101 catches, 1,194 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's kind of mind-blowing to think, that he did that with like Trey Lance and Cooper Rush as his quarterbacks. Obviously, we have him ranked at 2 because we're both assuming that Dak's going to stay healthy for all 17 games.
Cannot wait.
Fingers crossed. I really hope Dak does because, the year that, CeeDee had his number 1 season, Dak played all 17 games, and he had a phenomenal year. So I obviously 135 receptions for 1,749 yards and 13 touchdowns is steep, but what are you expecting from CeeDee this year, Will?
Yeah, I was just looking at his game logs from last year. He had 8 games with 10 plus targets. I don't know if he's going to have that many again with the addition of Pickens, but the big thing for me with CeeDee is I just think that the Pickens addition is just the volume is going to come down a little bit, but the quality of the targets he's receiving are going to be that much better. I think they kind of just let Pickens take over on the outsides, and in the middle it is all CeeDee Lamb, and he's going to have an absolute field day for sure. He's still going to have those games where he's got 10, 12, 14 targets in a game. I just don't, it's not going to be 8 times.
He's going to be necessary. I think the way it's going to roll because I think it's Brian Schottenheimer who's the head coach, and since McCarthy 2 years ago, and then Brian Schottenheimer this year, every single year they've talked about we need to have a more balanced running to go with the pass, and it's like the running backs on this roster are Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. I'm sorry, they're not like guys that I know who are going to get the ball 15 to 20 times a game. So just looking at their team from a 30,000 foot view, it's Dak and CeeDee.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and mix in a little bit of Pickens because I do think he is definitely going to matter.
Yeah.
He's probably the best outside receiver minus Amari Cooper that CeeDee's ever played with, and I think that's going to matter because you have to respect that on the outside.
Yeah, this team's gonna have to throw the ball. It's a it's a flashy market in Dallas. Jerry Jones wants all the eyes on them. So they're going to be airing the ball out, and CD. It's going to be Dak and CD all season. And Dak's going to throw the ball enough to where even if Pickens is a bigger part of the offense than we're anticipating, I don't think it's really.
I really hope so, because that year that CD was the wide receiver 1, Dak threw the ball 590 times.
Yeah, sign me up for that.
So like if you can get anywhere remotely close to that, I think it's just going to be good things for all the pass catching pieces all the way around.
Do you miss having CD? It's really fun having him.
Listen,
so thank you.
I do miss having CD. However, I think the move was right. So for those of you guys who don't know, after the year I won a championship in our dynasty league, Wu actually had the 101. We actually made a trade, and tell me if I'm wrong, Wu. I believe the trade was I gave up CD and Shakir, and then I got in return the 101, which turned into Caleb Williams, the Wu's second round pick that year, his first round pick the year after, and I think a second. I thought it was a first and a second both years, but it might not have been.
It was the 2024 101.
Yep.
Second round pick in 24. I don't remember what pick that was, and then a 25 first.
I think that pick was Pearsall, which actually, crazy enough, packaged that deal and JSN, and I got myself Puka Nacua.
There you go.
I do miss him, but I like where I'm at right now.
That's fair.
So, moving on to our third wide receiver, Mr. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Detroit Lions wide receiver, lead dog wide receiver. I think I am not afraid of Ben Johnson. I think a lot of people who may have Amon-Ra might be a little weary with Ben Johnson leaving and the uncertainty in the offense. But I think there are two things that are absolutely certain in this Detroit Lions offense is that, they're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs going and use that kind of two-headed monster of him and David Montgomery. Hopefully Jahmyr,
pulls
away and gets some more work. But when they start to key in on that, it's Amon-Ra in the slot, and he's just going to do damage. He's the most quiet, elite wide receiver that I've ever seen. It's comparable to Keenan Allen, but I think he's better than Keenan Allen. You know what I mean? So last year he had 115 receptions on 142 targets, 1,263 yards and 12 touchdowns. That's stud work right there. And I don't have his career log, but I'm going to pull it up for you right now.
I got it here too.
So the 4 years that he's been in the league, his rookie year, wide receiver 21, and then it was wide receiver 8, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 3.
He's coming off his best year.
Yeah, and it's just it's consistency, and I would not be mad having him as my wide receiver 1 in a redraft league.
Yeah, sign me up for that all day. If he's ever sitting there in a dynasty startup, I'm taking him every single time. There's a short list of names that I would take before him. 140 targets is insane. The year before he had 164. The ball's going to get to him.
And that year 2 years ago when he had 164 targets, he only had a 73% catch percentage.
Yeah.
This past year he had 82. He went up 9%. If he could see that kind of work with an 82% catch percentage, he's easily like a top 2, wide receiver.
If you play in full PPR leagues, he is such a smash play. It's the amount of targets he receives, they're not always crazy deep shots where he's taking the top off a defense. It's within 10 yards, and he's so physical that he just picks up extra yards and wears down a defense.
Yeah,
and then he'll have that big time play. I
was gonna say I'm looking at some of his logs, and week 15 against the Bills, 18 targets for 14 receptions and 193 yards. That's baller stuff.
He's averaging almost double digit targets a game, which is just
that's what you love to see.
The Ben Johnson piece, I get it, but the offense is way too explosive for him not to matter.
Right. And before we pass, I guess, judgment on what this offense is going to look like, you have to take from what you've seen lately. And what you've seen lately from him is wide receiver 3 stuff, and he's a stud.
Yeah. Yep. I'm all in.
Moving on, our wide receiver 4 is my guy, Justin Jefferson, Minnesota Vikings wide receiver. I have him at 2, and Wu hates him. Wu, tell me why.
That's a strong word. Hate's a strong word.
Tell me why you hate Justin Jefferson. It's jealousy, isn't it? Tell me.
No. I really like Justin Jefferson. The reason why
rankings say
saying
otherwise.
This, I have him ranked at 6, and it honestly has nothing to do with Justin Jefferson. I just can't sit here and say that I trust JJ McCarthy until I see it. If I'm wrong, that's fine. I'm totally going into this expecting to be wrong.
I'm gonna give you 2 words.
Okay.
Kevin O'Connell.
Listen, sure. Fine
If
argument.
there's anyone, if there's anyone that I trust more offensively, I think, outside of like Sean McVay, it's Kevin O'Connell. And ironic that he comes from the McVay system.
Right.
Anytime he's had a quarterback, they've propped up Jefferson to be a top 5. Hold on, let me just double check my work because I'm pretty sure. I just want to check the year he was with Kirk. He was wide receiver 29, and I think that was because he only played 10 games. So, but of the games he played, he still had 1,000 yards. I think no matter who the quarterback is, they're going to scheme it for Justin Jefferson. They're gonna make sure that he has the targets. And I think J.J. McCarthy, for as much as we don't know about him, I think he's actually going to do pretty well. I think I saw a news article when we were fishing for news, and I didn't want to put it in, but a beat reporter from Minnesota said that he's becoming a natural. People are gravitating towards him as a natural leader. So, I think that's all good things for Justin Jefferson.
Listen, I hear all that. I process it. I've taken it all in, and the last time we saw J.J. McCarthy play football was the year he goes on the run with Michigan. In that season, he finished top 10 in the Heisman voting. It was a great year overall. Obviously, he came home with a championship. He didn't even throw for 3,000 yards. Like, it just wasn't a part of the.
That wasn't the style, though.
It wasn't the style. But if that's the guy you're putting all your chips in, like if there's any year where Justin Jefferson's going to finish outside the top 5, I think it's this year. And listen, being 6th overall receiver on my list is not a bad place to be. Like if you're a top 10 wide receiver in my mind, like you had a very good season, but it's where Justin Jefferson's going to be drafted.
I'm smelling a jersey bet. I'm just saying it right now. I'm smelling it.
I'm only defeated in these jersey bets. I don't like them.
I'm just we take some time, think about it, but I will take you up on that offer of Justin Jefferson finishing in the top 5.
I need to see some more camp clips of J.J. McCarthy throwing a ball and seeing what that looks like.
You got to buy into the camp stuff.
Exactly. It's just, I don't know if there's ever a year where he's not going to be in the top 5. I think it's this one. Again, being 6th is not a bad season, but I think let's say we're in a redraft and I'm sitting there and I'm in a position to take Justin Jefferson, and there's a name like Amon-Ra sitting there. I think I'm taking Amon-Ra.
And I respect that. I totally respect that. But my question for you is, who would you rather have on your dynasty team as a quarterback, Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy?
Probably J.J. McCarthy.
See,
probably
you know what I mean.
McCarthy.
So like, if you're already,
but there's other factors that go into that decision, though.
Yes, because he's in a different situation and things like that, like Darnold is.
But if it was, who would you rather have on your dynasty team? And they're both playing for Minnesota, and either one of them could be the starting quarterback. I'm taking Darnold.
Oh, of course, because Darnold did it. You
right.
know what I mean? But we'll see. I just can't doubt on, Justin Jefferson. I think last year was the year that you're like, oh my God, like he's got, we all talked about Sam Darnold being washed.
No, I get it.
Kevin O'Connell turns him around, and Justin Jefferson is the wide receiver too, so I don't know.
I'm fully anticipating being wrong on this choice, but it's part of the game. Somebody has to be wrong.
And I think one thing I do want to point out with, and obviously, with you having him outside the top 10, I'm sure you're probably not alone with anyone who feels, down about, Justin Jefferson. But that smells to me that that's an opportunity to potentially trade because
100%.
he is with, Chase and CD, and I'll even throw Amon-Ra in there. Like, they're those untouchable wide receivers. And if there's ever any wavering from anyone, like just message the Justin Jefferson manager in your dynasty league and just see what he feels. If he's wavering because of J.J. McCarthy and the uncertainty, that is your opportunity to cash in.
100%.
Unfortunately, in our league, the person who has him is an absolute diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, so you're not getting him from Zach.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna go to wide receiver number 5, Mr. Puka Nacua, wide receiver from the Los Angeles Rams. I really appreciate. Wu, that you still have Puka up this high. You actually have him higher than me. You have him at 4. I had him at 5. I think we're both in agreement that obviously he had an injury nicked season, but a healthy Puka Nacua is an alpha
Another
dog.
same story as Amon-Ra, where if you play in a full PPR league, it's just like give me Puka, give me Amon-Ra. Like these guys just hone in on targets. Last year he had almost a 30% target share. I mean, he only played 11 games, but we've seen what he's only played. He's again another guy who's only been in the league 2 years, and it kind of feels like he's been around for a while.
Yeah,
but that just goes to show how dominant he's been. I'm not worried about Devontae Adams.
I was just about to ask you that.
I'm not worried. The things he did his rookie year with Cooper Kupp was insane. Obviously Devontae Adams, I think he's 32. So I've said this numerous times, I'm going to say it again. Any piece that's tied to Sean McVay, I want. Specifically Puka Nacua in this case. I still think Stafford's got another 2 solid years in him.
Yep.
And then obviously they'll have to think about their future after that. But for these next 2 seasons, Puka, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you know, you look at that Los Angeles Rams team, and it screams to me it's Puka centric. You know, obviously Kyron is a stud, and we love him, but you know, I think the offense is like Kyron is kind of the engine that pushes it down the field. You know, getting 4 to 5 yards a clip when he touches the ball, but Puka is the main focal point of this offense, and that they're going to try to make sure that, you know, he gets his touches and he gets his work, because when he does, you know, they win games. You know, I'm looking at their game log, right? Like week 11, Puka was the wide receiver 5. They win against New England. Week 14, he's the wide receiver 2. They beat Buffalo. Week 17 against Arizona, he's the wide receiver 12. They beat Arizona. Like when Puka is involved and doing his thing, you know, it only screams good things for the Rams.
So I got numbers to back up your Puka Nacua as a focal point of this offense. Last year he played 11 games. We know he had the injury. He finished the season with 106 targets. That was more than George Pickens, Rome Odunze, Khalil Shakir, Jordan Addison, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown. Like the list goes on and on. Devontae Smith. So the fact that he only played 11 games and he still has more targets than all of those names, and there's more that go down this list.
The Nico and the A.J. Brown one kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Nico and A.J. Brown both had injuries, but they played more games than Puka Nacua did. Right. So that just goes to show that when he's on the field, they want this guy to get the ball, and for good reasons.
Yeah. Do you think he holds on to I don't know, does he hold on to a 30% target share?
Probably not. I think Devontae's going to eat into that a little bit, but again, I just think the Rams offense is going to be that good where it won't matter.
Let me see. I want to see what Puka had for a target share and see what
for a target share last year.
Yeah,
he had a 30. It was 29.9, so they call it 30.
No.
The year before, 29.
No, Kupp last year had a 26.2%. You know, like, do you see Devontae Adams taking more of a target share than that?
I could see him in like the 22 to 24 range, because
right.
I think Cooper Kupp had a little more juice than what Devontae Adams had. I think Devontae Adams mainly is going to be anywhere from like 5 to 12 yards past the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Like need a first down on 3rd and 7, like we're going to Devontae Adams.
Oh yeah.
Like that. I think those are the kind of targets he's going to see.
Absolutely. Moving on to our wide receiver 6 is Malik Neighbors, wide receiver from the New York Giants. Malik Neighbors last year was I lost my tab. The thing when we talk about Malik Neighbors, we were all afraid of his, situation with, quarterbacks and things like that. And, obviously he said, I don't care. Yeah. And I'm just going to, I think he had.
I can play with anybody.
What do you, I have it here.
170 targets, 109 receptions.
1,204 yards, 11 and 7 touchdowns, and now it's silly to say because it's, his sophomore season, but now he's going to have the best quarterback he's ever had in, Russell Wilson and probably Jameis Jameis at some point.
To play like 50% of the games so bad, please.
You remember that time when, everyone thought that Jameis was the guy and
Neighbors would have 2,000 yards. 2,000 yards easily. 25, I would even go 2,500 yards.
But so with Russ being probably the majority, starter for the year, what are your expectations for Malik Neighbors?
I'm really not a fan of it being Russ. But I think that the Giants understand that they need to get this guy the ball. Like he is eons ahead of any other offensive weapon that they have. I think the other piece that we need to think about is the Giants defense is going to be gross. And I think it's going to actually keep them in some games. I'm not saying that they're going to go out and light the world on fire and, be a 7 to 10 win team and be, frisky in that sense. But they're not going to be getting killed, which may turn into some less passing volume for Neighbors when they're down by 20 and they have to air it out.
Yep.
But I think they're going to be in a lot more competitive games. So maybe that'll play well into Neighbors' hands where they need to go and score and try, and they're actually going to be in a position to win a game. And the importance of those drives are gonna be much higher.
Absolutely. I just want to read off the first 6 games of the schedule because it's probably the most gross, brutal thing I've ever seen in my life.
Screwed.
At Washington, at Dallas, home against the Chiefs, home against the Chargers, at New Orleans, and then home against the Eagles.
Yeah.
Like, what's your prediction for them? Like, win-loss wise, out of that, like it's got to be so tough.
I got to pull this up for myself.
So at Washington against the Commanders, what do you think? So, and then at week 2 at Dallas,
Loss.
Home week 3 against the Chiefs,
Loss.
Home week 4 against the Chargers. I think it's probably the most winnable game that they have so
but
far.
It's still loss.
Then week 5 they're at New Orleans. That's a win. New Orleans is going to be the worst team in the league.
Yeah.
And then week 6 home against the Eagles.
Loss.
Like
Broncos loss. Eagles loss.
Like and then the 49ers. Loss. Oh God! So you're telling me
Bears maybe
through 10 weeks they could potentially be 1-9.
So we said the Chargers was the most winnable game at that point. Still think it's a loss. That's week 4.
Yep.
Week 5 is a win against New Orleans.
Yep.
I don't see another winnable game. Maybe week 10 against the Bears, but we know we're high on the Bears until week 13 against the Patriots.
That's gonna.
And even then, it's
Brian Dable's gonna lose his job.
Vegas in week 17.
I'm telling you right now.
That's why he needs to get Dart on the field as soon as possible. As soon as possible.
He's going to lose his job so bad. It's
not even his fault.
And
like, how does that schedule even happen?
I don't know. I hate it so much for him, but like I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But obviously, back to Neighbors because we're talking wide receivers. I think, like you had said, he is eons ahead of any sort of offensive asset that they have.
Dable's smart enough.
That's why I think he's gonna get hyper targeted. Because we said he had 170 targets. Like that's crazy. He had 5 less targets than what Chase did.
Yeah.
Obviously, the quality of targets that he got versus the quality that Chase got are 2 completely different things. But I think he's just going to be a target monster the entire year because they have nobody else.
Yeah, and I think another thing that plays well into Neighbors' hands is the combination of Russ and Winston. Whatever the season shows us, they have been in the league long enough that they know they need to get the ball to their best receiver as much as possible. So I think that worked really well for Neighbors.
Yeah. All right, moving on to our wide receiver 7, Drake London, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons. Wu has Drake London as his wide receiver 5. I guess I'm the hater this time. I have him as
a big time hater.
The wide receiver 8. I have him on my personal rankings, and I think the reason why I have him so low compared to everyone else is that I am not sold on Michael Penix.
Okay.
We've only seen three weeks of Michael Penix. Sure, that was great. But again, that was also at the tail end of the season where I want to say the teams that they played. I'll pull it up. Those last 3 weeks.
Giants,
right?
Commanders,
Giants
Panthers.
Who were out of it. Commanders and maybe and Carolina who was out of it. So and oh no, he had a good game against Washington, I guess. But anyways. That is what scares me the most. We don't know, like Michael Penix is in the same kind of boat as your feelings of JJ McCarthy. This is the same feelings that I have for Michael Penix.
Okay.
Even though Michael Penix played 3 games and McCarthy's played none, it's still an unknown thing to me. So I'd rather take wide receivers that either I know who are, studs. Obviously, Neighbors didn't have a great quarterback, but I think Neighbors is a better caliber receiver than London, not by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But then everyone else has more solidified quarterback, situations. But that's my feeling on London.
I think the thing that helps Penix and London, just the Atlanta offenses in general, is that there is a Bijan Robinson that Atlanta can lean on if they need.
Very true.
And he can open up a lot of things for the passing game where Minnesota doesn't necessarily have that luxury. Another thing that jumps off the page for me is in those 3 games, London had 8 targets, 13, and 18 targets. So every week it went up. Penix understood where to throw the ball.
Yep.
They got to get it to their best guy. I believe the only other receiver on there, or like relevant receiver in Atlanta, is Darnell Mooney.
Who had a sneaky good season.
Who did when Kirk Cousins was playing well.
Right.
So I think that if you're thinking about, you know, percentage chance of, you know, how likely is it for, you know, Penix to fulfill a positive fantasy season, the percentage chance for Mooney is nowhere close to where it is for London.
Yeah, I was going to say the weeks that so those same weeks, Mooney was the wide receiver 29 and 66, and he didn't even play in week 18. So, you know, it felt as though Penix had eyes for, you know, one person and one person only, which is great. But I think that potentially could get stale. Teams start to catch on and things like that. But, you know, obviously if that continues and, you know, London is able to, you know, really step into, you know, that alpha, you know, wide receiver, like I'm all in. I love London as the player. It's his, you know, quarterback situation that just kind of scares me.
No, I get it. But that, you know, we talked about the windows for breakout opportunities, and it was his last year for London to finally break out, and he did. So I think that's a really positive sign, you know, going forward. And I think I'm in on Penix. I liked what I saw in Washington. They were willing to actually throw the ball in that offense, and, you know, you could see that side of him in college. Like he had Rome Odunze and who's the other Washington receiver on that?
McMillan and Jalen Polk.
Yeah. So I mean, he had options, and they were willing to throw the ball in that college offense. So I'm leaning on the likelihood of Penix being a solid NFL star. I don't know what his ceiling looks like, but man, he throws a tight spiral.
He does.
You seen those clips?
I have seen those clips.
Yeah, it's tight.
Yeah. Looking at their schedule, it looks like they are crossing over with the AFC South. No, I'm trying to look at it. No, it's the NFC West that they play, because they play the Seahawks, Cardinals, Rams, and the 49ers, and then the AFC division they cross over with. It looks like the AFC East. Okay. So those are going to be some tough games, you know, against the Bills. I think we both expect the Patriots to, you know, be better too. So, you know, we'll see if that's going to be opportunities that they're going to have to, you know, throw a lot in the game. But, you know, they also invested in their defense heavily in the draft. You know, they had their 2 first-round picks were defense, so, you know, maybe that plays into account too. Who knows?
It also a plus just playing in the NFC South. Yes, we're expecting the Panthers to be better, but the Saints are a dumpster fire. Obviously, Tampa Bay's good, but those games can be
shootouts.
You know, some big-time shootouts.
Oh, yeah. So, who knows? Maybe that is good. Moving on to our wide receiver 8, Brian Thomas Jr., BTJ. I think... Great name. You know, last year he was the wide receiver 4 and just kind of came out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, I think we all expected, you know, this obviously that wide receiver class being so elite, you know, with Marv and Malik Neighbors, you know, and you know, Brian Thomas Jr. is the best was in fantasy wise was the best of them all. 87 catches for 133 off of 133 targets, 1,282 yards and 10 touchdowns. And the crazy thing about it is he mostly did that with Mac Jones as his quarterback. Yeah. I think, you know, obviously I don't expect him to give us a wide receiver 4 season, but I think he is the dude in Jacksonville. And if if Trevor Lawrence can, you know, like hyper target him, he might be better than wide receiver 8 in my opinion.
His best weeks came after Trevor Lawrence went down. And another thing that we've talked about on this show is when you have rookie players, you know, wide receivers, running backs, after that bye week, things start to look up, and that's exactly what happened. He went wide receiver 16, 24, 4, 3, 14, and 11. So, yeah, we haven't even seen a full season with him and Trevor Lawrence. I think I'm kind of on the up and up on Jacksonville when it comes to them going into this year. Yep. I really like what Liam Cohen did in Tampa Bay and how powerful that offense was. There's a lot of fantasy points to be had on those Tampa Bay teams. Yep. So I think that should directly carry over to Jacksonville. And you know, we've talked about it before, the prospect of Trevor Lawrence coming into the league. Like it was Peyton Manning, and we still haven't seen that yet. And I really hope Liam Cohen can get that out of that.
I was gonna say, I mean, if there was a time to do it, like it's now or nothing. You know, now or never for Trevor Lawrence. You know what I mean?
Like I've poked around about Trevor Lawrence a little bit, just a little bit.
Sniffing for some trades?
Yeah, just seeing, you know, just testing the waters, kicking some tires.
Sure,
doing my due diligence.
I don't know. I'm nervous for Trevor Lawrence. You know, like I'm just looking at his like career logs. You know, he's only had, from attempts percent, wise. Yeah, rookie year he had 602. That's, great. You want to see, 2022 was 584. 2023 is 564, and I know last year he was hurt, so I'm not even going to bring that up. But I want to say Baker was in like the 570s. So he can do it, yes, but it's I don't know. I really, really hope that Lawrence turns into that generational prospect that everyone talked about him being, and who knows, maybe I like that now. You talking about making a trade for him, because it's like, buy low on him now, and he blows up because he has these weapons. He has Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. And ETN out of the backfield. They drafted Byshell Tootin, who I've heard that they're going to use him heavily in the offense. So like he has weapons. It's whether or not he become something with those weapons.
Right. And we haven't even talked about him yet, but Travis Hunter, I think that is a very interesting piece for Brian Thomas as well. I think Travis Hunter's, if he does get the amount of wide receiver work that we're hoping for, I think it's a lot of it is going to be, short to intermediate, work in the middle of the field, out of the slot, that kind of thing. So I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for people to kind of take their eye off on Brian Thomas Jr. for a second, and all of a sudden he's wide open down the field. So
yeah, talking about that stretch you were saying after the bye week, I'm just looking at his targets: 10, 12, 14, 13, 10, 11. Like he just had double-digit targets
every
game after that. So.
And the catch percentage is north of 60% every single time, except for one.
Yeah, I was gonna say he averaged 65%, and let's just say he bumps it up by like 5 percentage points. Like that's a great season.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Next one, wide receiver 9 we have on our list is Nico Collins, wide receiver out of Houston. Listen, there was at one point in the year, Nico Collins was the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy football before Chase had had his breakout and everything like that. Obviously, Nico was hurt, finished as the wide receiver 23. So it was kind of, he still had 1,000 yards, and seven touchdowns, but the first 5 weeks of the season, my man was on fire. Was wide receiver 14-4, 35 down game against Minnesota, but then the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 16 against Buffalo. So, I'm hoping that with, 2 things, praying for the health of Nico Collins and he can play all 17 games. But I do.
He hasn't yet.
No, he hasn't. But I do think the change in offensive coordinator, I believe it's Jim Cawley, out of LA. That's right.
Rams.
Out of LA. I think those 2 things, like if he can stay healthy, and then they incorporate, this Jim Cawley system, which is essentially a scent of McVay. You know what I mean? I think that could be insane, because they've already, I've heard Stroud talk about over the offseason how, there's a lot of responsibility on him where he's making, checks at the line, he's calling audibles and things like that. And I think he has a great relationship with Nico Collins. He obviously had a better one with Tank Dell, but we're not going to see him this year. So, hopefully that turns into, hyper targeted, of Nico Collins.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the new offensive coordinator situation and what he brings to the table. Nico, all of his physical traits just scream like wide receiver 1, dominant alpha 1 for a team.
6'4", 222 pounds.
Yeah, like what else could you really ask for? The other thing is that, Houston drafts both of the Iowa State wide receiver guys, so they have a little bit of help there. It's not going to be all eyes on Nico. And I think both those guys are talented enough to make some noise in the NFL.
And they traded for Christian Kirk too.
Exactly. And, yes, CJ Stroud had a bad year last year. The year prior, everybody was thinking, okay, Houston's going to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So, it's crazy how quickly people can change their minds. So we do need to think about, CJ Stroud was that guy at one point. And again, it's only been 2 years. Like, give the guy a chance. I love Nico here. I know early on when we were making, we first started making episodes for this podcast, I might have said I like DJ more than Nico. I would like to walk that take back.
Walk it back. Please.
If you'll allow me to do so.
I will allow it.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I'm going to walk that back. I really like Nico this year. It sucks that Tank Dell won't be there.
It does.
It
bums me out
really
it bums me out every time. And maybe it's a little bit biased out of me because I traded for him last offseason. But like, I don't know, you just feel for the dude.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm all in on Nico. I think another important piece that you brought up is the new offensive coordinator. He comes from LA. He was associated with McVay, and I really hope that comes over to Houston.
Yeah. Houston crosses over this year schedule-wise with the NFC West, so that's the Rams, Cardinals, Seahawks, 49ers. And then they also cross over with the AFC. No, they're in the South. AFC West. So that's the Chargers, the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. So that's a very competitive schedule.
I think it's favorable too.
You think so?
I
think so. Do you see Houston repeating as division winners here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
I think so too. I think obviously the next best team is probably the Jags, but I don't think they're there yet to compete. I mean, they could. Who knows if things fall their way? But I think still Houston is the favorite to win this division.
Yeah.
So, all right.
And again, like I said real quick earlier with the Falcons, they have a divisional advantage playing Tennessee twice.
Yep.
We'll see what happens with Jacksonville. That defense isn't great, so they play them twice. And then Indy as well. They get to play twice a year.
Exactly. All right, we're going to move on to our wide receiver 10. That is Marvin Harrison Jr. We were just talking about him top of the show.
Jerry, bad trade. Not gonna lie, dude, bad trade.
I think Wu and I still believe that he is a wide receiver 1. I'm curious to see where he is going to fall ADP wise in redraft leagues. I think
it's not going to be the back of the first. I know that.
I know it isn't, and I think that will be the year. I think this year will be the lowest that you will ever draft Marvin Harrison Jr. because I think obviously people overhyped him. He was a first round or end of the first round in fantasy drafts last year, and I think people just kind of overhyped him. And with his play, his play kind of brought him back down to normalcy. I think. Like I said before, a full NFL offseason, coupled with working with Kyler Murray, and they build that connection, I think it's going to be dangerous because outside of him or outside of McBride, who else is there really to fight for targets? You know what I mean? It's like it's Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. Like that's all they got. But again, where is it? Do you have his stat line? Oh, I have it right here.
116 targets, 62 catches. He didn't have 1,000 yards. Almost 8 yards per target. And he had 8 touchdowns, which is nothing to scoff at.
It just, as someone, because I was that guy who drafted him at the end, back of the first round in redraft leagues, and watching those games, it just felt like number one, they didn't want to incorporate him in the offense, which I have no idea why you would ever do that.
Announced to me.
And number two, it looks like it's not all on the coaching staff of Arizona because he had like poor body language. Like it wasn't like, coming up to Kyler and saying, you got to get me the ball or anything like that. It's just, he was okay taking a back seat and not, being the priority. And I hope, he sees that and hears that criticism. And I hope that he's able to, say, all right, I'm going to be that alpha guy that everyone expects me to be because, obviously, I was terrified. Week 1 against the Bills, he had 3 targets and 1 catch, and I was like, "Oh my God!" But then the next week against the Rams, 8 targets, 4 catches. He had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's like that's the dude that we all expected to be, So like if he can give more consistent performances like that, he's easily a wide receiver 1 every single year.
Yeah, I think
not the one, but like in the top 12.
100%. I think one thing for Marvin Harrison last year, he went through a major culture shock. He went from being the big man on campus at Ohio State. Everybody's watching him at noon. He's got 100,000 people watching him, and he's putting up 4 touchdowns and like 200 yards, like ridiculous stat lines. And then he comes to Arizona, and they're mid to not great team, and not as many people are watching the games, and the immediate connection with Kyler Murray wasn't there, and again, like you said, like the body language wasn't there. So he went from being on the top of the mountain to having to start all over, and there's already much more proven NFL receivers in him, so he's not he goes from being the best wide receiver in college football to being a rookie, and he's got to start all the way down at the bottom of the totem pole again. So I think that also plays into it. But we've talked about the breakout ranges, and second year breakout is huge for NFL receivers. We've seen it with Debo and AJ Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Cooper Kupp. So there's a track record of guys breaking out in their second year. And I fully expect Marvin Harrison to be added to that list.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm looking. I had to double check their over under win loss. They're set at 8.5. They cross over with the NFC South and the AFC. I think it's the. Oh no, sorry, NFC West and the AFC South. I think I'm taking their over on wins.
Would you say it was 8.5?
8.5. Because listen to the schedule. Saints, Panthers, 49ers, yes, it's a loss. Seattle, which I think it's going to be a dogfight as always, but then they play Tennessee, Indianapolis, Green Bay, Dallas, Seahawks again, the Jaguars. I can see it. I could see them actually turning this around. If Marvin Harrison steps into this alpha dog role, they have all the pieces. You have Kyler, you have Trey McBride, you have James Conner. I might be in on Arizona.
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
I like it. It's spicy. No, 9 wins isn't ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying.
Looking at this schedule, it's definitely not ridiculous. What they win last year? 7 or 8?
They had 8 and 9.
They were knocking on the door to begin with. And I think this roster's improved,
especially with Seattle taking a step back. I don't know what their split was, like if they split or if they lost both games to Seattle, but I could see them either winning both those games against Seattle or splitting again. Obviously San Fran's going to be a lot better, but it's a divisional opponent and anything can happen.
I wonder what their odds are to win the division.
Listen,
is it enough to think about?
Yeah, I think it's enough to sprinkle.
Yeah,
enough to put a sprinkle. You know what we should do? I think we should do. Obviously it's not related to Dynasty, but I think we should do an episode of potential futures.
Okay, like
future bets. Yeah. I think that'd be dope.
Yeah, keep your eye out for that.
Yeah. Rounding out, we got 2 more in our top 12 before we finish up. Number 11. Take it away, Will. I'll give it to you.
Mr. G5. Garrett Wilson, baby. Let's go. I can't wait.
I think we're both fans of Garrett Wilson. I think the encouraging thing, 2 things. Number 1, obviously, is he got his college quarterback, in Justin Fields back. And number 2, there's nobody there. There's nobody there. It's a barren wasteland.
Although, did you see my waiver pickup?
Oh, I saw that. I knew.
Aaron Smith, yeah.
Of course
had to be done. Had to be done. Listen, I saw Aaron Glenn talking about him. I was ready to run through a brick wall. So,
of
had
course.
to do it.
But so the crazy thing though is that, we've always talked about, with Garrett Wilson, it's like waiting for the breakout to happen. And you look at his game log, it was happening. Obviously the first 4 weeks of the season were putrid, but the Jets were putrid, but once they kind of got it rolling, he was, from week 5 to 9 before they got Devontae Adams, he was the wide receiver 5, 2, 20, 15, 3, and he was doing it on the back of 22 targets, which is insane.
Yeah.
10 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets, so it was happening. And then obviously Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers and wants Devontae Adams. And so he starts to really focus on, Devontae Adams, and Garrett Wilson takes a back seat. But now there's nobody there in New York to he takes a back seat to. Everything is going to go his way. It's
all him.
It's going to be almost like a repeat of 2023. Where he had 168 targets.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're better targets from Justin Fields, but we'll have to wait and see.
There's one thing I want to bring up because I think it's important, and I'm afraid I'm going to jinx myself. So he's played 17 games all 3 years of his career, and the best ability is availability. So he's going to be on the field. I really am excited to see the college connection reunited with Justin Fields. I think that's a huge, mental piece for both of them. They're both comfortable with each other. The big thing with Garrett Wilson for me is, he's not the biggest guy. He's 6 feet, 180, which he's not small. He's kind of fits right into the middle. So like when we were talking about Nico and his physicality kind of just screams like wide receiver one. Wilson doesn't necessarily have that. Oh my God, is this guy so twitchy? Like he'll get a ball like 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. He's got to make guys miss, and he does it. I don't know how. He also has the greatest catch of all time in NFL history. That Halloween game against Houston.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
I just wanted to look at his stats. His last year at Ohio State when he was with Justin Fields. 70 catches, 1,058 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Only playing 11 games. So. Yeah. Hopefully you see more of that. But we'll have to see.
I saw a clip of him earlier this week, I think, saying they were asking him, because the Jets picked up his 5th-year option,
as they should,
but he's up for a contract, which is another piece. He's coming up on a contract year, so he's gonna want to go out and earn as much money as he can. But New York Jets, pay this man his money. Please. He has said he wants to be a Jet for life. The amount of times I've heard that is ridiculous across so many players. But he seems to be really bought into the new culture that they have with Aaron Glenn. I'm excited to see with their new offensive coordinator. He also came over from Detroit, a part of the passing game planning. And listen, just give the guy his money. He said he wants to be here. He is a freak athlete, can make guys miss like there's no tomorrow. He's got great hands. And he's starting to become one of the guys on the Jets that's been there for, the longest. That's kind of how the Jets work, is they don't usually have long tenured guys. Mm-hmm. And he's starting to get up there where he's been there. He's been around there. He's going to be a leader in the locker room. And Aaron Glenn said that they got to get the guy the ball.
Yeah. I'm still mind blown that their total over under is still 5.5. And looking at the schedule, so they cross over with the NFC South. So that's the Saints. That's a win. Panthers is probably a win. Falcons, who knows with Penix, and then the Bucks, and then obviously the AFC they cross over is the AFC North, which is going to be tough. But I could see 3 out of 4 wins out of those NFC South teams, and then you play your division winners, or division opponents twice. So maybe they sneak a game against the Dolphins. Who knows? They win 2 right there. That's 5 wins. And then they still play the Steelers, who, we've talked about is probably going to be a down year. And then where was another, and the Patriots too. Yeah. So I don't see this team winning less than 5 games.
Their first 6 weeks is tough. Like I was just running through it in my head. I think they beat Steelers, which by the way, I'll be at that game.
Live stream it.
Me and Zach, boots on the ground. So I got them beating the Steelers.
Bill's not happening.
Lose to Buffalo, yeah. I think they lose at Tampa Bay. They lose at Miami. They lose to Dallas. They lose to Denver.
Ooh.
But I think they can beat Carolina, Cincinnati.
Shout out Rondo.
Yeah, Rondo. We're gonna have to have a bet on that.
It's actually a lot tougher than I thought.
But like Cleveland, I think they at least split
then it starts to ease up a little bit, right? Cleveland.
Yeah. Well, then they got Baltimore. I think Atlanta can be a toss up, like you said with Penix.
Yep.
I think they split with Miami. I just don't think they would win at Miami.
Sure.
So I'll take
especially
week 14.
that early in the year.
Yeah.
It's end of September. Yeah, it might be a little hot.
But the end, they could get hot at the end. After Baltimore, they get Atlanta, Miami, Jacksonville, New Orleans, New England. So I don't know. Are
you calling New York Jets to the playoffs?
No, God, no.
No.
Right. I have some crazy takes, but when it comes to the Jets, I like to think I'm pretty grounded in that aspect. So yeah,
I hear you. Staying in the AFC West or AFC East, I'm sorry, we're gonna finish off with our wide receiver 12, Tyreek Hill. It's a sad day when Tyreek Hill is at wide receiver 12 in any rankings, but I think it's. I thought about it. Obviously we had our dynasty startup draft in FTR where we took him and he's our wide receiver 3 and we're like, oh my God, like we probably got a steal. The more I think about it, like I think this is starting to be the end for Tyreek Hill.
Probably.
You know what I mean? Like obviously he had his his injury, and maybe that was what affected him, but he didn't miss a game. He played all 17 games last year and he was the wide receiver 23. So it's and of course, Tua's health comes into play in that situation and everything like that. I get that. But, he is – how old is it? He is 31, you know what I mean? And he's played a long time in this league. And like we've seen with elite players, it just goes in a flash like that, And, I'm not calling for it because I love Tyreek Hill. I think he's a special talent and he's a unique wide receiver, in the NFL. But it could be this time.
Yeah, I mean he had his best season ever in 2023 with Miami. fantasy wise. And it's just crazy to think that kind of can just go away that quickly. And that's why I'm not exactly fully sold on that. I still think there's stuff there. I just think last year was such a one-off season for Miami with the Tua stuff. And, because the year prior, their offense was, top whatever in the league. Like, they were blowing teams out and putting up crazy amount of points. So I don't think that's gone away. I still think Tyreek Hill's got some juice in him, but he is at that age where, it's scary hours on, if is he going to make it through the full season? And even like last year when he does, he's only the wide receiver 23.
Right. Let's play a game really quick with Tyreek Hill. I'm going to give you Tyreek Hill or.
Okay.
Would you rather have Tyreek Hill or Lad McConkey?
Well, all right. So some clarifying questions. This is going into next year.
This is going into next year, redraft only.
Redraft only. Okay. Tyreek Hill or Lad McConkey? Lad.
Tyreek Hill or AJ Brown?
Tyreek.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Tyreek Hill or Mike Evans?
Mike Evans.
Last one, Tyreek Hill or DJ Moore?
Tyreek Hill.
I just think that one in there.
Yeah, no, that's warranted.
So those are a couple of names. I think I'm probably with you on most of them. I think I still would probably rather have AJ Brown instead of Tyreek Hill. But we'll see how kind of his year plays out. I think it's
he's got one more good one in him. He's got one more.
It has to. He has to give us one more good one. But like I said, he's 31 years old. He's over that like age 30, cliff. It just might not be there. You know what I mean?
The mental side also might not be there with some of the news that's coming out on him recently.
Wait, what happened? I didn't see this.
Dude, I swear, like every other week, he's like something crazy, like news about him. Let me see if I can pull something up.
Does it have to do with his 10th kid that he's had already?
Yeah, right. Phillip Rivers Jr.
Yeah, I know.
I look up Tyreek Hill. The first thing that comes up: how many children does Tyreek Hill
really
have?
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully he can kind of separate that in football and just come in each week and do his thing, man. You know, we'll have to see.
Tua, stay on the field, please.
Yes, and that's the other key piece too is Tua needs to stay in the field, stop targeting Jonnu Smith and just throw the ball down the field to him and Waddle.
Yeah.
But so those are our top 12 way too early rankings. There are a couple of honorable mentions. I know we didn't have it written in the doc, Wu, but do you have anyone off the top of the dome that you want to just throw out as a keep an eye on honorable mention?
I mean, to be like, I know I just said I would take Tyreek Hill ahead of him, but you always have to consider AJ Brown.
Yes.
For me, it's just they just won a Super Bowl off of running the ball as dominantly as they did, and why change something that just won you a Super Bowl? So that makes me kind of nervous about him, but the talent and the physical attributes and all of that is absolutely there. It's just a matter of how involved isn't the right way to say, because he's going to be involved, but to what magnitude does he, what does he look like in this run dominant offense?
Yeah. I'm nervous too. I know that when we talked about in our year in review series that they could be shifting into like a run dominant thing, and AJ Brown kind of gets phased out. But I believe you're still going to get one more elite or borderline elite season from AJ Brown before he kind of hangs it up. So with that being said, if you're a team who is looking to make a championship run, you might want to just throw out a feeler for AJ Brown, see what you can get out of him.
Yep.
Name I'm going to give you, Will, for an honorable mention is Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
Rashee Rice. Listen. The things that are telling me that I'm in on Rashee Rice this year are two things: the age of Travis Kelce and him being a lot older. I think Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce kind of demand the same target or portion of targets in the field, that like it's the over the middle, the quick slants that Rashee Rice gets.
Yep.
And number two is the injury. I think people are overplaying his injury so much. I think he's fully healthy. And I think people are really like overplaying, his injury. He got hurt in week 4, that was back in, the beginning of October. And it wasn't even an ACL tear. I want to say it was a PCL tear. So It's not like it's an ACL where it's like a full calendar year. Some people take, you know what I mean? Like I remember we were talking about the video or a couple of months ago where he's already doing box jumps off that knee and things like that.
Yep.
I think Kansas City struggled royally last year, with their
It's an
offense.
understatement.
You know what I mean? So I think they're going to try to, not to say that it's going to go the complete opposite way of the, pendulum where Mahomes is throwing the ball 600 times a year.
Right.
But I think they're going to get Rice involved early and often, and he's going to be the engine that kind of makes that offense move. Those quick slants, because and he's the kind of dude that like he takes a quick slant in stride. He can take it to the house. And he's only 25 years old. I think Rashee Rice might have a better season than we're all thinking.
Yeah, I had Rashee Rice in a redraft league last year, and those first 3 weeks were fun, man. Let me tell you. But oh god. I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm sure for everybody, is the legal issues and what's going to come of that.
And I was going to say, there's rumors that doesn't even come into play this year.
I thought it was. I thought that was.
I thought so too. I thought so too. But from what I've seen on Twitter, like some people are saying like that may not even come into play. And if that doesn't come into play and you get a full season of Rashee Rice, I'm in. I'm in. He's a wide receiver 1 all day.
Well, yeah, it's the the injury I'm not worried about at all. It was all just the legal stuff. So if that's not going to be an issue this year, then he's someone I'm looking out for.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Those are our top 12 way too early 2025 wide receiver rankings. We appreciate you guys listening in. If you are a fan of the show and you like what you listen to, make sure you give us a follow on our socials at 4th and Fantasy Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We're at 4th and Fantasy. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Obviously, if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, make sure you give it a rating, a like, even leave a comment. That really helps us out. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the other side.
See you.